Imagine waking up tomorrow morning, grabbing your phone, and checking your bank account. You have $10,000 in there. You breathe easy. But then you scroll down and see a notification from your bank. Important. Currency conversion update. You click it. Your $10,000 is now worth $100. No, you weren't hacked. No, the bank didn't steal from you. Your country just did something called a currency reset. And here's the thing that should absolutely terrify you. 7 countries have done this in just the last 20 years. 7. That's not ancient history. That's not some dusty textbook example from the Great Depression. This is happening right now in our lifetime to people just like you and me. So today, we're going to dive deep into one of the most catastrophic financial events that can happen to ordinary people. We're going to look at real stories from Argentina, Zimbabwe, and Venezuela. We're going to talk about what a digital dollar could mean for your money. And most importantly, we're going to discuss how you can protect yourself if this ever happens in your country. Because here's the truth, if you think this can't happen to you, you're making the same mistake millions of people made right before they lost everything. Let's get into it. Alright, let's start with the basics because this stuff can get confusing fast. A currency reset is essentially when a government says, you know what? Our money is broken. We're starting over. They introduce a new currency and exchange the old one at a specific rate. Sometimes it's 1 to 1. Sometimes it's 1,000 old dollars for one new dollar. Sometimes it's worse. Now, why would a government do this? Usually, it's because of hyperinflation. That's when prices spiral out of control so fast that your money becomes essentially worthless. Imagine going to the grocery store, and a loaf of bread costs $1,000 today, but next week it costs $10,000. That's hyperinflation. When things get that bad, governments panic. And their solution? Hit the reset button. But here rests what they do and tell you on the news. When they hit that reset button, it's not just the currency that changes. It's your savings, your future, your security. Think about it. You spent years building up your savings account. You worked overtime. You skipped vacations. You saved for your kids' education, for retirement, for that house you've been dreaming about. And then, overnight, the government decides that all those numbers in your account mean something completely different. The value doesn't just shift, it evaporates. And the worst part? There's usually nothing you can do about it. By the time they announce it, it's already too late. The banks freeze. The ATMs shut down. And you're left holding paper that's worth less than the paper it's printed on. So let's look at how this actually played out in the real world. Let me tell you about Maria. Maria was a school teacher in Buenos Aires, Argentina. In December 2001, she had about $15,000 in her bank account. Not a fortune, but enough. Enough to feel secure. Enough to know that if something went wrong, she'd be okay. Then came December 1st, 2001. The Argentine government announced what they called El Corralito, the little fence. Cute name, right? Except there was nothing cute about it. Overnight, they froze all bank accounts. You couldn't withdraw more than 250 pesos a week. That's about $250 at the time. Maria's $15,000? Locked, trapped behind that little fence. But it gets worse. The government also announced a currency devaluation. The peso, which had been pegged 1 to 1 with the US dollar, was suddenly worth much, much less. By 2002, you needed 3 pesos to buy what 1 peso bought before. Eventually, it got even worse. Maria's $15,000 effectively became $5,000 in purchasing power. Just like that, and she couldn't even access it. People rioted in the streets. Banks were attacked. The president resigned. Middle-class families who had saved for decades suddenly found themselves in poverty. Now, Argentina's situation was complicated. There were debt defaults, IMF negotiations, corruption, all sorts of factors. But for Maria and millions like her, the lesson was simple and brutal. Your money in the bank is only as stable as your government's promise. And governments break promises. Argentina has actually gone through multiple currency crises. They've redenominated their currency several times. In 1983, they created the peso argentino. In 1985, the austral. In 1992, the peso. Each time, zeros were lopped off. Each time, savings were destroyed. The people who survived these resets? They weren't the ones who trusted the banks. They were the ones who saw it coming and moved their wealth into hard assets, real estate, foreign currency, gold. But Argentina isn't even the worst example. Let me paint you a picture. It's 2008. You're in Zimbabwe. You go to the ATM and withdraw the maximum amount, 100 billion Zimbabwe dollars. Sounds like you're rich, right? Wrong. That $100 billion is enough to buy 3 eggs. Yes, 3 eggs. This is what happened in Zimbabwe under Robert Mugabe's government. They printed money so recklessly that the currency became literally worthless. At the peak of Zimbabwe's hyperinflation in November 2008, prices were doubling every day. Not every month. Not every week. Every single day. People would get paid in the morning and sprint to the store because by afternoon, their salary would be worth half as much. There are photos from this era that look like something out of a dystopian movie. People carrying wheelbarrows full of cash just to buy bread. Children using bricks of $100 trillion bills as toys because they were worthless. The Zimbabwe government eventually printed a $100 trillion bill. That's not a typo. 100 trillion. It's the highest denomination currency ever officially printed. And you know what it could buy? A bus ticket. Eventually, in 2009, Zimbabwe completely abandoned its own currency. They started using foreign currencies instead: US dollars, South African rand, British pounds. They basically admitted that their money was so broken, they had to give up entirely. But here's the thing. Before it got that bad, there were warning signs. Inflation started slowly. The government said they had it under control. They blamed sanctions, they blamed drought, they blamed foreign interference. But they kept printing money, and the people who believed them, they lost everything. Your bank account, your life savings, your pension, all of it became worthless overnight. And it didn't matter if you had $1 million Zimbabwe dollars or $1 billion. 0 times any number is still 0. The only people who survived financially were those who converted their money into real assets or foreign currency early. And let me be clear, the government tried to stop them. They imposed currency controls. They made it illegal to hold foreign currency. They tried to trap everyone in the sinking ship. But some people jumped anyway. Now, you might be thinking, okay, but Zimbabwe was an extreme case. That was corruption and mismanagement on a ridiculous scale. That couldn't happen in a more developed country, right? Wrong. Let me introduce you to Venezuela. 25 years ago, Venezuela was one of the wealthiest countries in Latin America. They had massive oil reserves, the largest in the world. They had a growing middle class. People had savings, jobs, stability. Today, over 7 million Venezuelans have fled the country. That's almost a quarter of the entire population. Those who stayed faced shortages of food, medicine, electricity, and their money, worthless. Venezuela has gone through multiple currency resets. In 2008, they removed 3 zeros from the bolivar. In 2018, they removed 5 more zeros and renamed it the Bolivar Soberano, the sovereign bolivar. In 2021, they removed another 6 zeros. Let me make that clear. If you had 1 million bolivars in 2008, and you kept it in bolivars through all these resets, by 2021 you'd have ... 1 bolivar. You lost literally everything. And here's what makes Venezuela so chilling. This happened in the 21st century, in a country with modern banking, internet, smartphones. This isn't some third world country with straw huts. This is a nation that had skyscrapers, universities, hospitals. There are stories of doctors making $5 a month, lawyers working as Uber drivers just to afford food, middle-class families selling their furniture piece by piece just to survive. And the government? They kept saying everything was fine. They blamed the US. They blamed capitalism. They blamed anyone but themselves. The people who protected themselves saw the signs early. They moved money out of the country. They bought hard assets. They bought cryptocurrency, yes. Venezuela became one of the biggest adopters of Bitcoin specifically, because people were desperately trying to preserve their wealth. But most people? They trusted that it wouldn't get that bad. They believed the government. They waited. And they lost everything. So I mentioned at the beginning that 7 countries have done this in the last 20 years. We've covered 3. Let me quickly run through some others. Turkey redenominated in 2005, removing 6 zeros from the lira. North Korea did a surprise currency reform in 2009 that wiped out people's savings overnight. Belarus redenominated in 2016, removing 4 zeros. South Sudan has had ongoing currency crises since its independence. And there are other countries that have faced severe devaluation, even if they didn't do a full redenomination. Brazil, Russia, Ukraine, the list goes on. Here's why this matters. This isn't rare. This isn't some freak occurrence. This is a pattern. And every single time there's a common thread. The government says everything is fine until suddenly it's not. Every single time the people who suffer most are the ordinary citizens who kept their savings in the bank, who trusted the system, who played by the rules. The wealthy? They're fine. They have assets abroad. They have property, gold, foreign investments. They can write it out or leave entirely. But the middle class, they get destroyed. And that brings us to something that should make everyone nervous. The digital dollar. Now, the United States Federal Reserve and many other central banks around the world are exploring something called central bank digital currencies, or CBDCs. The pitch sounds great, right? Digital money. Fast transactions, financial inclusion, efficiency. But let's talk about what a CBDC really means. A central bank digital currency would essentially be money that exists only digitally, controlled directly by the central bank. Every transaction could be tracked. Every dollar could be programmed with rules. Think about that for a second. What if the government could set an expiration date on your money? Spend it by next month or it disappears. What if they could decide what you're allowed to buy? Sorry, you've reached your limit on gas this week. What if they could freeze your account instantly without a court order? Sound far-fetched? China already has a digital yuan and they've used it to control behavior. They've literally programmed money to only work in certain areas or for certain purchases. Now here's where this connects to currency resets. A digital currency makes a reset incredibly easy. With physical cash, you need to print new bills, collect old ones, coordinate banks. It's messy and complicated. But with digital currency, it's just changing numbers in a database. Imagine this scenario. The US has massive debt, which it does. Inflation is out of control, which many people argue it has been. The government decides to introduce a new digital dollar to stabilize the economy. They announce that everyone's bank accounts will be converted at a rate of, say, 10 old dollars to 1 new dollar. They call it modernization. They say it's necessary. And just like that, your savings are cut by 90%. Impossible? Go ask Maria in Argentina. Go ask the people in Zimbabwe. Go ask Venezuelans who lost everything. They all thought it was impossible too. Now, I'm not saying this will definitely happen. I'm not a fortune teller. But I am saying the infrastructure that would make it easy is being built right now. And history shows us that when governments have the power to reset currency, eventually they use it. Alright, enough doom and gloom. Let's talk solutions. Because here's the good news, you're not helpless. There are concrete steps you can take to protect your wealth from a potential currency reset. This is stuff that people in Argentina, Zimbabwe, and Venezuela wish they'd done sooner. First, diversify your currency holdings. Don't keep all your money in one currency. If you're American, consider holding some euros, British pounds, Swiss francs, or Japanese yen. Yes, there are restrictions and tax implications. But having some currency diversity means you're not completely exposed if one currency collapses. Second, hard assets. This is the big one. Throughout history, when currencies collapse, hard assets hold value. What are hard assets? Real estate, land and property have intrinsic value. People always need places to live and work. Yes, property values can drop, but real estate tends to preserve more wealth than cash during a currency crisis. Gold and silver. For thousands of years, precious metals have been a store of value. Governments can print money, but they can't print gold. Physical gold and silver that you can hold in your hand, not paper certificates, not ETFs, but actual physical metal. Commodities. Things people actually need. In Venezuela, people who owned farmland or had stockpiles of basic goods survived much better than those with cash. Third, skills and knowledge. This might sound weird, but hear me out. Your skills can't be inflated away. If you're a plumber, an electrician, a doctor, a mechanic, you have value that transcends currency. During currency crises, barter systems often emerge. The person who can fix things, grow things, or heal people has power. Fourth, cryptocurrency. Now this one's controversial, and I'm not giving financial advice here. But it's worth noting that many people in Venezuela, Argentina, and other countries with currency crises have used Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies to preserve wealth. Crypto has its own risks, volatility, regulation, technology issues. But it's decentralized, which means no single government can just turn it off or reset it. It's worth learning about at minimum. Fifth, keep some physical cash. If a currency reset happens, there's often a period where banks are closed and digital systems are down. Having physical cash on hand, enough for a few weeks of expenses, can be a lifeline. Yes, that cash might lose value, but it gives you options while everyone else is panicking. Sixth, stay informed and watch for warning signs. Currency resets don't happen in a vacuum. There are warning signs: rapid inflation, government debt spiraling, central bank printing massive amounts of money, currency controls being implemented, capital flight, wealthy people moving money out, political instability. If you see these signs, it's time to act, not hope things get better. Seventh, have a plan. This is crucial. If things go south, what's your plan? Do you have important documents ready? Do you have assets that are portable? Do you have contacts or family abroad? Do you have skills that would be valuable anywhere? I'm not saying become a doomsday prepper living in a bunker. I'm saying have a plan B, because the people who survived these crises best weren't the ones who had the most money. They were the ones who had the most options. The system isn't designed to protect you. Banks, governments, financial institutions, they all talk about protecting depositors and financial stability. But when push comes to shove, when a real crisis hits, you're on your own. In every currency reset we've discussed, the government's priority was the government. The bank's priority was the banks. The central bank's priority was the central bank. You were expected to take the loss for the good of the economy. And here's the really uncomfortable part. The people who did well during these crises, they weren't lucky. They were prepared. They saw the signs. They acted when everyone else was in denial. There's a quote often attributed to Hemingway: "How did you go bankrupt?" Two ways: gradually, then suddenly. That's how currency crises work. Things get gradually worse, a little more inflation, a little more debt, a few warning signs, but most people ignore the gradual part. They only pay attention when things go suddenly wrong, and by then it's too late. So let's bring this home. What happens to your bank account during a currency reset? The simple answer: it loses value. Sometimes a little, sometimes catastrophically. But the deeper answer is this: what happens to your bank account depends on what you do before the reset happens. Maria in Argentina lost most of her savings because she trusted the system. People in Zimbabwe ended up with worthless paper. Venezuelans watched their entire middle class evaporate. But in each of these countries, there were also people who prepared. People who diversified. People who saw the signs and acted. Here's what I want you to take away from this video. 1. Currency resets are not ancient history. They're happening right now, in our lifetime. 2. Your money in the bank is not as safe as you think. It's a digital number backed by a government promise. And history shows that when governments face pressure, they break promises. 3. You have power. You can diversify. You can invest in hard assets. You can learn skills. You can prepare. 4. The time to act is before the crisis, not during it. Look, I'm not trying to scare you. Well, maybe a little. But only because fear can be a useful motivator. The people who lost everything in these currency resets weren't stupid. They just believed it couldn't happen to them. Don't make that mistake. Start small. Buy a little gold. Learn about cryptocurrency. Develop valuable skills. Have a plan. Because here's the thing. If I'm wrong and nothing bad ever happens, great. You've diversified your assets, learned new things, and become more financially resilient. You haven't lost anything. But if I'm right, and someday you wake up to that notification from your bank saying there's a currency conversion update, you'll be one of the people who's prepared. You'll be one of the people who survives. And you'll be very glad you watched this video. If this video opened your eyes, do me a favor, smash that like button. Subscribe and hit the notification bell, because we're going to keep diving into financial topics that actually matter, the stuff they do and teach you in school. The stuff the banks don't want you to know. Drop a comment below and tell me, do you think a currency reset could happen in your country? What are you doing to protect yourself? I read every comment, and I want to hear your thoughts. And hey, share this video with someone who needs to see it. Your family, your friends, especially that person who thinks their savings account is completely safe. They need to wake up. I'll see you in the next one. Stay informed, stay prepared, and stay free.